This is the 9th discussion with Mr. J. Krishnamurti and Dr. Bohm on June the 1st, 1980, and is held at Brockwood Park and includes Mr. Narayan.
I'd like to talk over with you, and perhaps Narayan too, what is happening to the human brain. I'll go into it a little bit. You have highly cultivated civilization and yet at the same time barbarism. Great selfishness, clothed in all kinds of spiritual garbs, Holy Spirit, Holy Ghost and all the rest of it, but deep down, heightening, frightening selfishness. And man's brain has been evolving through millennia upon millennia, and it has come to this point. Divisive, destructive. And so on, which we all know. So I was wondering whether the human brain, not a particular brain, but the human brain, is deteriorating. Whether it is capable of revival, renewal, or is a slow, steady decline. And whether it's possible in one's lifetime to bring about in itself a total renewal from all this. A renewal that will be pristine, original, unpolluted. I've been wondering about it, and I thought we would meet and discuss it. And I think the human brain is not a particular brain. It doesn't belong to me or to anyone else. It's the human brain, which has evolved 10 million or 5 million or 3 million years. And in that evolution, it has gathered tremendous experience, knowledge, and all the cruelties and the vulgarities and the brutalities of selfishness. Is there a possibility of its sloughing off, throwing off all this and becoming something new? Because apparently is functioning in patterns. Whether it is a religious pattern or a scientific pattern or a business pattern or a family pattern, it's always operating, functioning in a very small, narrow circle. And those circles are clashing against each other. And there seems to be no end to this. Yes. You follow it? Yes. So, what will break down this forming of patterns, not falling into other new patterns, but breaking down the whole a system of patterns, whether pleasant or unpleasant. After all, the brain has had so many shocks. So many challenges, so many pressures on it. And if that brain is not capable in itself to renew, to rejuvenate itself, there is very little hope.
Yes. But you see that the one difficulty might present itself, that if you're thinking of the brain as a structure, that is, we cannot get into the structure.
No.
Physically.
Physically you cannot. I know, we discussed this.
Yes.
So what is it to do? I mean, the brain specialist can look at it, take the brain dead of a human being and examine it, but it doesn't solve the problem. Right?
No.
So what is a man or a human being to do, knowing it cannot be changed from outside, or the scientists, brain specialists, and the nerve specialists, neurologists and all that, explain the thing, but it is there. Their explanation, their investigation was not going to solve this. Right?
Well, yes, there's no evidence that it can. Right?
Yes, no evidence. All right. I'll put a little more. A little more congenially.
Some people may have thought so. You see, some people who do biofeedback think that they can influence the brain, you see, by connecting an instrument to the electrical potentials in the skull and being able to look at the result, and you can change your heartbeat and your blood pressure and various other things. So they have raised the hope that something could be done.
But they're not succeeding.
We're not getting very far.
Very far. But we can't wait.
Yes.
You follow me? Mm-hmm. For these scientists and biofeedbackers to to solve the problem. So what shall we do?
Well, then the next question is whether the brain can be aware of its own structure. You see that?
Yes, that's the first question.
Yes.
Can the brain be aware of its own movement? Mm. And the other question is, can the brain not only be aware of its own movement, can the brain itself have enough energy, to break all patterns, move out of it?
Yes, well, you have to ask whether the brain can do that. You see to what extent is the brain free to break out of patterns?
What do you mean?
Well, you see, that if you begin by saying the brain is caught in a pattern,
yes,
it may not be
apparently
free.
It is apparently.
Yeah, as far as we can see. But it may not be free to break out. You see that.
I understand.
It may not have the power.
That's what I said. Not enough energy, not enough power.
Yes, but it may not be. Yes, it may not be able to take the action needed to get out.
Yes.
Whatever that may
So
be.
it's become its own prisoner.
Yeah.
Then what?
Well, then that's the end.
Is that the end? No.
If that's true, then that's the end. I mean, so if the brain cannot break out, then perhaps people would choose to try some other way, I don't know, to solve the problem.
When we speak of the brain, in one sense, the brain is connected to the senses and the nervous system. The feedback is there. Is there another instrument to which brain is connected, which has a different effect on the brain?
What do you mean by that? Some other factor?
Some other factor in the human system itself.
Well,
because
what would it be?
obviously through the senses the brain does get nourishment, seeing and various factors. But still that is not enough. Is there some other internal factor which gives energy to the brain?
You see, sir, I think there is I want to discuss this. You see, the brain is constantly in occupation. Worries, problems, holding on, attachment, and so on. So it's constantly in a state of occupation. That may be the central factor. And if it is not in occupation, does it go sluggish? That's one factor. If it is not in occupation, can it maintain the energy that's required to break down the patterns? I don't know if I'm making myself.
Yes. Now the first point is that if it's not occupied, somebody might think that it would just take it easy.
Take it. No, of course. Then it becomes lazy.
Yes.
No, I don't mean that.
No, but if you mean not occupied but still active,
Of course, I mean that.
then we have to go into what is the nature of the activity.
That's what I want to go into.
Yeah.
I mean, if this brain, which is so occupied with conflict, struggles, attachments, fears, pleasures, and all that, and this occupation gives to the brain its own energy, right? If it is not occupied, will it become lazy, drugged, and so lose its elasticity, as it were? Or, if it doesn't become lazy and so on, will that unoccupied state give to the brain the required energy to break?
Yes. Well, if you ask a question, you see, what makes you say that this will happen? You see that. When it says something about the brain. They say that we were discussing the other day that when the brain is kept busy with intellectual activity and thought, then it does not decay and shrink, you see.
Yes, as long as it's thinking, moving,
thinking
living
in a rational way,
yes,
then it remains strong.
Yes, as long, that's what I want to get at too, which is, as long as it is functioning, moving, thinking rationally,
it remains strong. If it starts irrational movement, then it breaks down.
Yes.
Also, if it gets caught in a routine, it begins to die.
Right.
See, that was
So
true.
that's it. That is, if the brain is caught in a routine, either the meditation routine or the routine of the priest,
or the daily life of the farmer.
And so on, so on, so on, it must gradually become dull.
Well, not only that, but it seems to shrink physically.
Shrink physically,
yes,
right.
Perhaps some of the
From
cells
what
die,
we were
right?
discussing the other day. Yes, shrink physically. Now, and the opposite to that is this eternal occupation with business, as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a scientist, thinking.
Yes.
And we think that also, that prevents shrinking.
Well, it does, at least it seems, the experience seems to show it does, the measurements they make.
Yes, it does too.
Yes,
that's it. Excuse the word farmer.
Whatever it is, also the routine clerical worker. See, anybody who does a routine job, which
anybody.
Yes, his brain starts to shrink after a certain age.
Yeah.
Now that's what they discovered, and just as the body not being used, as the muscles begin to to lose their strength.
So take lots of exercise.
Well, so they say exercise the body and exercise the brain, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes. Now, in if it is caught in any pattern, any routine, any directive too, right, it must shrink.
Yeah, it's not clear why could we go into what makes it shrink, you see?
That's fairly simple. Because it's repetition.
Yeah. Well, the repetition is mechanical and doesn't really use the full capacity of the brain.
I've noticed the people who have spent years and years in meditation are the most dull people on earth. And also those lawyers and professors and all the rest of them, you can see them. There's ample evidence of all that.
The only thing that article seems to say is that rational thinking postpones senility.
Yes.
But rational thinking itself becomes a pattern at some time.
Well, it might. I mean, they didn't carry it that far, you see, but that rational thinking pursued in a narrow area might become part of the pattern too, right?
Of course.
But you see, if you say that there's some other way...
We are going to that. I
Yes.
want to go into
But
that.
suppose we were
presently.
to clear it up about the body first. You see, if somebody does a lot of exercise with the body, it remains strong, but it might become a mechanical pattern.
Of course.
And therefore it would have a bad effect. Right?
You see, that's what you see, yoga.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say. What about the various, if I may use the word, religious instruments, the traditional religious instrument, yoga, tantra, kundalini, etc., etc.
No, I know.
Do they?
Oh, they must shrink. Because you can see what is happening. Yoga, take for example, used to be, it was not vulgarized, if I may use that word. It was kept strictly to the very, very few who were not concerned about Kundalini and all that kind of stuff, who were concerned leading a moral, ethical, so-called spiritual life, without exercise, ordinary exercise, but not this fantastic gymnastics. You see, I want to get at the root of this.
Well, I think there's something related to this that, it seems to me that before man organized into organized societies, he was living close to nature, and it was not possible to live in a routine.
No, it was not.
But it was insecure, completely insecure.
Yeah.
Now,
So are we saying, that's what I want to get at,
Yeah.
are we saying the brain becomes extraordinarily, is not caught in a pattern, because if the brain itself lives in a state of uncertainty,
well, yes, not knowing...
without becoming neurotic.
Well, yes, I think there has to be even more clarity when you say not becoming neurotic. As uncertainty becomes a form of neurosis.
Neurosis, of course.
But I would rather say the brain lives without having certainty, without demanding.
Yes,
certainty.
without demanding certainty.
Without demanding certain knowledge. You know.
Yeah. So are we saying, I want to get, are we saying that knowledge also withers the brain?
Well, when it's repetitious and becomes mechanical, yeah.
But knowledge itself.
Well, yes, we have to be careful there.
I know.
You see,
I know we have to be careful.
I think that knowledge has a tendency to become mechanical, that is, to get fixed. Right?
Yeah.
But we could be always learning, you see.
But learning from a center.
Well,
learning from as an accumulative process.
Well, that learning, I think, with something fixed. You see, you
That's
accept
it.
something as fixed and you learn from there. But
Yes.
if we were to be learning without holding anything permanently fixed,
That is, learning and not adding. Can you do that?
yes. Well, you see, I think that to a certain extent we have to lose. We have to drop our knowledge you see, knowledge may be valid up to a point, and then it ceases to be valid. It gets in the way. You could say that our civilization is sort of collapsing from too much knowledge.
That's what I was, of course.
That we don't drop what's in the way.
Many forms of knowledge are additive. I mean, unless you know the previous thing, you can't do the next thing. Would you say that kind of knowledge is repetitive?
No, as long as you're learning, you see. But if you hold some principle fixed and say it cannot change, see, if you hold the center fixed, yourself, or anything fixed, then that knowledge becomes mechanical. But see, if you say you have got to keep on learning.
Learning what?
Whatever you're doing. You see, for example, suppose you have to make a living. You see, people must organize the society and do all kinds of things. They need knowledge, right?
That's knowledge.
Now,
but there you add more and more.
That's right, but you may also get rid of some.
Some, of course.
You don't keep on. Some gets in the way, you see. So it's continually moving, right?
Yes, but I'm asking, apart from that, knowledge itself.
Well, yes, but I mean, what you mean knowledge without
yes.
This content, right?
The knowing mind.
Well, mind which merely wants knowledge, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Just for its own sake?
Yes.
Hmm? Mm.
No, I want to question, if I may, the whole idea of having knowledge.
Yes, but again, it's not too clear, you see, because, you see, you accept that we need knowledge.
Of course, I just said.
So it's not clear what kind of knowledge it is that you're questioning, you see.
I'm questioning the experience that leaves knowledge.
That
leaves
knowledge. Yes, but again, when you say the experience of driving a car, yeah, but I mean, it's not. We want to make it clear that what kind of it leaves a mark psychologically, is that
psychologically, of course.
Rather
I'm talking
than knowledge of technique and matter and so on.
Of course.
Yeah, but you see, when you use the word knowledge by itself, it tends to include the whole.
No, we have said knowledge at a certain level is essential. There you can add and take away and keep on changing, moving there. But I'm questioning whether psychological knowledge is not in itself a factor of the shrinking of the brain.
Yes, well, that's now. What do you mean by psychological knowledge? Knowledge about the mind, knowledge about myself.
Yes.
Knowledge about what?
Knowledge about myself and living in that knowledge and accumulating that knowledge.
Yes. So if you keep on accumulating knowledge about yourself, or about relationships.
Yes, about relationships. So that's it, sir. Would you say such knowledge helps the brain, makes the brain somewhat inactive, somewhat makes the brain shrink.
Puts it into a rut. I mean,
yeah.
But you see, one should see why. What is it about this knowledge that makes so much trouble?
What is this knowledge that makes so much trouble? In relationship, that knowledge does create trouble.
Yes, it gets in the way.
In the way.
Because it fixes the...
Yes.
And also in...
If I have an image about him and I'm related to him, that knowledge is obviously going to impede our it becomes a pattern.
Yes, well, the knowledge about myself and about him and how we are related makes a pattern.
Yes. And therefore that becomes a routine, and so it loses its...
Yes, and it occurred to me to see that routine in that area is more dangerous than routine in, say, the area of work.
That's right.
If routine in ordinary work can shrink the brain, then in that area it might do some worse, something worse, because it has a bigger effect. Right?
So can the brain, in the psychological matters, be entirely free from knowledge, from this kind of knowledge? That is, look, I'm a businessman. And I get into the car or bus or a taxi or the tube, and I'm thinking what I'm going to do, whom I'm going to meet, or business talk, and my mind is all the time living in that area. I come home, there's a wife and children, sex and all that. That also becomes a psychological knowledge from which I'm acting. So there's the business, the knowledge of my business and contacts and all that, and also there's the knowledge with regard to my wife and myself, my reactions. So these two are in contradiction. Or I am unaware of these two and just carry on. If I am aware of these two, it becomes a disturbing factor.
Yeah. Well, also people find that it is a routine and they get bored with it and they begin to
divorce and all the
so
whole circus begins.
And they may hope that by becoming occupied with something else, they
Yes.
can get out of the...
Get out, go to church and go to... any escape is an occupation. So I'm asking whether this psychological knowledge is not a factor of the shrinkage of the brain. Sorry.
Yes, well, it could be a factor, evidently. If ordinary,
It is.
If knowledge of your profession can be a factor, this knowledge is stronger.
Of course, much stronger.
Yes.
When you say psychological knowledge, you are making distinction between psychological knowledge and, let us say, scientific knowledge or factual knowledge.
Of course, that's what we're saying.
Yes, although...
But I'm a little worried about this article and the fact that scientific knowledge and other types of factual knowledge helps to extend or make the brain bigger. That in itself doesn't lead anywhere.
What do you mean?
Though it postpones senility.
What?
Exercising of rational thinking and...
as Dr. Bohm explained very carefully, if rational thinking becomes merely a routine, I think logically, and therefore I've learned the trick of that, and I keep on repeating it.
That's what happens to most forms of rational thinking.
Of course.
Yes, I think that, say, that they depend on being continually faced with unexpected problems. You see, like as they said, lawyers are very... That their brains last longer because they're faced with constantly different problems, and therefore they cannot make it entirely a routine, you see. Perhaps eventually they could, but it would take a while.
But sir, just a minute. They may have different clients with different problems but they're acting from that from a knowledge which has they're acting from knowledge.
Yes, well, they would say not entirely. They have got to find new facts.
Of course,
and so on.
they're not entirely, but the basis is knowledge, precedents, and book knowledge and various experience with various clients.
But then you would have to say that some other more subtle degeneration of the brain takes place, not merely shrinkage.
That's right. Yes. That's what I want to get at.
Yes, that's right.
That's what I want to get at.
See, there is also what's known is that when a baby is born, the brain cells have very few cross connections. Then they gradually increase in number, and then as a person approaches senility, they begin to go back. So the quality of those cross connections could be wrong. As another example, that would be too subtle to show up in these measurements. But for example, they could become, if you repeated them too often, they would get too fixed.
Are all the brain functions confined to rational forms?
No.
Or are there some functions which are of a different quality?
Well, it's known that, for example, a large part of the brain deals with movement of the body and so on. and with muscles and with various organs, and this part does not shrink with age, you see. But the part that deals with rational thought, if it is not used, does shrink. That's the.
Yeah.
Now then there may be other functions that are totally unknown. That is, very little is known actually about the brain.
Which we don't touch. Is there a possibility of that sort?
No, what we are saying, what I'm trying to explain it, we're only using one part of very partial of the brain. And that partial activity is the occupation, either rational or irrational, or logical, and so still using the part. And as long as the brain is occupied, it must be in that limited area. Would you say that?
Yes, well then what will happen when it's not occupied? You see that.
That's what we'll go into that.
Yes.
We'll go into that in a minute.
But we can say that it may tend to spend most of the time occupied in that limited set of functions, which are mechanical.
Mechanical,
and,
yes.
That will produce some subtle degeneration of the brain tissue. That since anything like that will affect the brain tissue.
Are we saying that senility is the result of mechanical way of living, mechanical knowledge, and so the brain has no freedom, no space, no sense of...
Well, that's the suggestion. You see, it's not necessarily accepted by all the people who work on the brain. They have shown that the brain cells start to die around the age of 30 or 40, at a steady rate. But this...
Be careful, you'll listen.
But this may be affected. They have not been... I don't think their measurements are so good that they could test for the effect of how the brain is used, right? They're merely rough measurements made statistically, and so you want to propose that since this death of the brain cells or the degeneration will come from the wrong way of using the brain.
That's right.
And
that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, and there's a little bit of evidence in favor of it from the science.
Thank God.
Yes. But I think that the brain scientists don't know very much about it. No.
So, you see, scientists, brain specialists are, if I may use a rather easy words, they are going out, examining things outside,
Yes.
but not taking themselves as guinea pigs and going through that.
Well, mostly, you see, except for those who do biofeedback, they're trying to work on themselves in a very indirect way.
Yes, but
Not
I
very
don't.
deep.
I feel we haven't time for all that kind
No,
of stuff.
it's too slow and it's
Too
not very
slow,
deep.
Not very deep. So, let's come back to the point. I realize that any activity which is repeated, any action that is directed in a narrow sense, any method, any routine, logical or illogical, does affect the brain, and so on, so on. We have understood that very clearly. And knowledge at a certain level is essential, and also psychological knowledge about oneself, one's experiences, all that has also becomes routine. And the images I have about myself also becomes, obviously it's a routine, and so that helps to bring about a shrinkage of the brain. I have understood all that very clearly. Now I say to myself, and occupation, any kind of occupation.
With this...
Of course, we've said that.
Yes.
Any kind of occupation apart from the mechanical, not mechanical, physical occupation, the occupation with oneself.
Yeah.
That obviously and does bring about shrinkage of the brain. Now, how is this process to stop? And when it does stop, will there be a renewal?
Yes, I mean I think again some brain scientists would doubt that the brain cells could be renewed, but I don't know that there's any proof one way or the other.
I think they can be renewed. Mm-hmm. That's what I want to discuss.
Yes, so we have to discuss that.
Is there, I want to put this question because in one discussion between you in Ojai, you are implying that mind is different from the brain. Mind is distinct from the brain.
Not quite. Did I?
Yes. The possibility of mind as distinct from the brain.
It was a universal mind.
Mind in the sense one has access to this mind and it is not the brain. Could you conceive of that possibility?
Well, I don't quite follow this.
That?
I would say the mind is all-inclusive.
Yes.
And when it is all-inclusive, brain, emotions, all the rest of it, when it is totally whole, not divisive in itself, there is a quality which is universal.
Yes.
Right?
One has access to it.
Not you can't reach it.
No.
You can't say I have access to it.
No, I'm saying access, one doesn't possess it, but one has
Well,
access to it.
Can't. That means you can't possess the sky.
No, my only point is there a way of being open to it? And is there a function of the mind in that the whole of it which is accessible through education?
To education.
Through education.
I think there is. We'll come to that presently if we can stick to this point. We have reached a certain point in our discussion. We won't go back to repeat it again. Now we're asking now, having understood all that, after this discussion, can the brain itself renew, rejuvenate, become young again? Not without any shrinkage at all. I think there is. I want to open the new chapter and discuss it. I think there is. I think psychologically, knowledge that man has acquired is crippling it. The Freudians, the Jungians, or the later psychologists, later psychotherapists are all helping to make the brain shrink. Sorry, there is nobody here.
Is there a way of forgetting this knowledge then?
No, not forgetting. I see what they are doing, and I see the waste. I see what is taking place if I follow that line. I see it obviously. So I don't follow that avenue at all. So I discard altogether analysis. That's the pattern we have learned. not only from the recent psychologists and psychotherapists, but also it's the tradition of 1,000 million years to analyze, introspect, say I must not, this is right, this is wrong. The whole process. I reject. I personally don't do it, and so I reject that whole method. We are coming to a point which is direct perception and immediate action.
And
because our perception is directed by knowledge. The past perceives.
Yes.
And so, the past, which is knowledge, perceiving and acting from that, is a factor of shrinking senility. Better use the word. Shrinking the brain. So is there a perception which is not time-binding? Right, sir? And so action which is immediate. Because, am I going, am I making my, that is, sir, the brain has evolved through time. And it has set the pattern of time in action. And as long as as long as the brain is active that way, it is still living in a pattern of time, and so becoming senile. If we could break that pattern of time, then the brain has now broken out of its pattern, and therefore something else takes place. I don't know if I'm making...
How does it break out of the pattern?
But I'll come to that. But let's first see if it is so.
Yes, well, you're saying the brain is, that the pattern is the pattern of time. Now,
pattern of time.
I mean, perhaps, it should be clarified that, and I think that what you mean by analysis is some sort of process based on past knowledge.
Yes, sir.
Which organizes your perception.
Yes, sir.
And you take a series of steps to try to learn, to accumulate knowledge about the whole thing. And now you say this is a pattern of time and you have to break out of it. Now,
yeah.
Say, what does
if
that
we
mean?
agree to that,
yes.
If we say that so brain is functioning in pattern of time.
Yes. Now, then you would have to ask, you see, I think that most people would ask, what other pattern is possible?
Wait. I won't say...
What other movement is possible?
No, I'll say, first let's understand this.
Yes. Right.
Not merely verbally, but actually see that it is happening. That our action, our way of living, our whole thinking is bound by time. Or comes with the knowledge of time.
Yes, well, certainly our thinking about ourselves, any attempt to analyze yourself or think about yourself, it involves this process.
Process which is of time.
And,
right?
That's the difficulty. When you say knowledge and experience, they have a certain cohesive energy, force. It binds you. It sort of...
Which is what? Time binding.
Time binding. Analysis...
and therefore, the pattern of centuries, millennia is being repeated.
Yes. What I'm saying is, this has a certain cohesive force.
Of course.
You can't run away from it.
No. All illusions have an extraordinary vitality.
Yes. Very few break through.
Look at all the churches, what their immense vitality they have.
No, apart from these churches,
No, but I'm taking
one's personal life,
Yes.
There's a certain it keeps you back. You can't break away
And
from
what
it.
happens if you do that? Keeps you. What do you mean keeps you back?
It has a magnetic attract. It sort of pulls you back. You can't free yourself of it unless you have some instrument with which you can act.
We are going to find out if there is a different approach to the problem.
Yeah. I mean, when you say a different instrument, then it's not clear what you mean.
That's why I'm
Because that brings time in again. You see, the whole notion of an instrument involves time. You
Time,
see,
yes,
because
that's just
you
it.
use an instrument any instrument is a process which you plan and.
That's why
so
the word instrument to mean it is effective.
No, this has not been effective.
It's not been effective, no.
On the contrary, it is destructive. So do I see the truth of its destructiveness, not just theories, ideas, but the actuality of it? If I do, then what takes place? The brain, which has evolved through time and has been functioning, living, acting, believing, all that in that time process. And when one realizes that helps to make the brain senile, and I won't go into all that. Now, if you see that as true, then what? Next step.
Are you implying that the very seeing that it is destructive is a releasing factor?
Yes.
And there's no need for an extra instrument?
No. Don't use the word
I'm
instrument.
putting it because...
He keeps on repeating the word instrument. There is no other factor. See, I am concerned, I'm using the word not personally, I'm concerned to end this shrinkage and senility and asking whether the brain itself, the cell, the whole thing move out of time. Not immortality, I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. Move out of time altogether. Otherwise, deterioration, shrinkage, senility is inevitable. It may not, the senility may not show, but the brain cells are becoming weaker, and so on.
If brain cells are material and physical, somehow or other they have to shrink through time and age. It can't be helped. It can't be the brain cell, which is and the tissue cannot be in physical terms immortal.
Well, yeah, but perhaps the rate of shrinkage would be greatly slowed down. You see, if a person, say, lives a certain number of years and his brain begins to shrink long before he dies, you see, so he becomes senile. Now, if it would slow down, then...
Not only slow down, sir.
But regenerate, if you wish.
Not be in a state, quickly, in a state of non-occupation.
Yes, but I think Narayan is saying that it's impossible that any material system could last forever.
I'm not talking lasting forever.
Yeah, well, but you could
I'm
say...
not sure if it can't last forever.
Yeah, so...
A material...
No, this is very serious. I'm not pulling anybody's leg.
If all the cells were to regenerate perfectly, or in the body and in the brain, then the whole thing could go on indefinitely. Right?
Look, sir, we are now destroying the body.
Yeah.
Drink, smoke, overindulgence in sex, and all kinds of things. we are living most unhealthily, right? If the body were in excellent health, maintained right through, which is no heightened emotions, no strain on the mind, on the body, no sense of deterioration in the body, the heart functioning healthily, normally, Why not?
Well,
which means what? No traveling. No traveling.
Yes.
All the rest of it. If the body remains in
no
one
excitement, yes.
quiet place, I'm really in a quiet place, I'm sure it can last a great many more years than it does now.
Yes, well, I think that's true, that there have been cases of people living, say, to 150 in quiet places.
Yes.
And, but I think I think that's all you're talking about. You're not talking of, say, living
no, I'm not
forever, really.
So, the body can be kept healthy.
Yeah.
And since the body affects the mind, nerves, senses and all that, that all also can be kept healthy.
And if the brain is kept in the right action, then the
without
brain also
any
organizes
strain,
the body.
right.
You see, the brain has a tremendous effect in organizing the body. The pituitary gland controls the entire system of the body glands, and also all the organs of the body are controlled from the brain.
Right.
So
that's right.
if the brain deteriorates, the body starts to
Of course.
So it works together, but
they go together.
Yes.
So can this brain, which is not my brain, but the brain which has evolved through millions of years, which has had all kinds of destructive experience, pleasant, all the rest of it, can that brain...
Well, you mean that it's a typical brain, you see, not a peculiar brain peculiar to some individual. Right? When you say not mine, any brain belonging to mankind. Right?
Yeah, any brain, I'm talking about...
They're all basically similar.
Yeah, similar, that's what I said. Can that brain be free of all this, of time? I think it can. Go ahead,
I say we could discuss what it means to be free of time. You see, that they say at first sight it might sound crazy, because and obviously we all know you don't mean that the clock stops or anything, but still
science fiction, all that.
But the point is, what does it really mean to be psychologically free of time?
That there is no tomorrow.
But I mean, there's tomorrow. You see that. So you
psychologically, but psychologically.
Well, how does that? Can you describe that better? What does it mean to say no tomorrow?
So, what does it mean to be living in time? Let's take the other side first before we come to the other. What does it mean to live in time? Hope, thinking, living in the past, and acting from the knowledge of the past. The images, the illusions, the prejudices are all outcome of the past. All that is time. And that is producing in the world chaos.
Yes, well, suppose we say that if you're not living psychologically in time, then you may still order your actions by the watch, but
of course.
The thing is a little puzzling. Say suppose somebody says, "I'm not living in time, but I must make an appointment." You see.
Of course, we can't sit here forever.
That's right. So you say, "I'm looking at the watch, but I'm not psychologically extending how it's going to feel."
Yes.
In the next hour, when I have fulfillment of desire or whatever.
So I'm just saying, the way we are living now is in the field of time.
Yeah.
And there we have brought all kinds of problems, suffering, all that. Right?
Yes, it should be made clear why this produces suffering necessarily. You see that Say, if you live in the field of time, you're saying that suffering is inevitable.
Inevitable.
But could you
Inevitable.
make it clear simply why?
It's simple, which is time has built the ego, me, the image of me, sustained by society, by parents, by education. That is built after a million years. That is the result of time. And from there I act.
Toward the future. Right?
Towards the future.
I mean, toward the future psychologically, that is towards some future state of
yes.
being, right?
Being, which is, the center is always becoming.
Trying to become better.
Better, nobler, or the other way around. So all that, this constant endeavor to become something psychologically is factor of time.
Yes, are you saying that produces suffering?
That is obvious. Why? Oh my Lord, why?
There's also...
Because it's simple, it's divisive. It divides me, and so you are different from me.
Yes.
And me, when I depend on somebody, and that somebody is lost or gone, I feel lonely, miserable, unhappy, grief, suffering. All that goes on. So, we are saying, time by any factor of division, which is the very nature of the self, that must inevitably suffer.
Yes, are you saying that it's through time the self is set up, it's organized, and the self introduces division
Yes.
and conflict and suffering?
All
and
the
that,
rest of it.
That if there were no psychological time, then maybe this entire structure would collapse.
That's it.
And something entirely different would happen.
That's what I'm saying.
Without
And therefore, the brain itself has
then
broken
that's
down.
the next step, to say the brain is broken out of that rut.
Yes.
And maybe it could regenerate, but
That's
it doesn't follow logically, but still it could, right?
I think it does follow logically.
Well, it
Rationally.
follows logically that it would stop degenerating.
Yes.
And then you're adding further that it would start to regenerate.
Yes. You look skeptical.
Yes, because the whole human predicament is bound to time.
Yes, we know that.
Societies, individuals, the whole structure.
I know.
And it is, as again I want to be, it's so forceful that anything feeble doesn't work here. Anything feeble.
What do you mean feeble?
The force of this is so great
Yes.
that if you have to break through,
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
comes must have greater energy.
Yes.
And no individual seems to be able to generate this energy to be able to break through. That's one of the difficulties.
There is not, you've got the wrong end of the stick, if I may point out. When you use the word individual,
A human being.
But you are moved away from the fact that our brain is universal.
Yes, admit that.
There is no individuality.
That brain is conditioned this way.
Yes, we've been through all that.
Yeah.
It's conditioned this way through time.
Yeah.
Time is conditioning. Right? It's not time has created the conditioning.
Its very structure is inherent
Yes,
in it.
time itself is the factor of conditioning. So, can that time element not exist? That's psychological we are talking about, not in the ordinary physical time. I say it can. And we said the ending of suffering comes about when the self, which is built up through time, is no longer there. For a man who is actually going through agony, going through a terrible time, he might reject this. He's bound to reject it. But when he comes out of the shock of this, and somebody points out to him, and if he's willing to listen, if he's willing to see the rationality of it, not build wall against it, but see for himself the sanity of it, he's out of that field. Not as the brain is out of that time-binding quality.
Temporarily.
Huh?
Temporarily.
That again, when you use the word temporary, it means time.
No, he slips back into time.
No, you can't. You can't go back if you see something dangerous. Go back to it. You can't. Like a cobra, like a whatever dangerous thing.
The difficulty
cannot.
The difficulty is, the analogy is a bit difficult because your structure is that. You inadvertently slip into it.
Look, Lauren, when you see a dangerous animal, there is immediate action. It may be the result of past knowledge, past experience, but there is immediate action. Self-protection. Psychologically, we are unaware of the dangers.
Yes.
And if we become as aware of the dangers as we are aware of a physical danger, there is an action which is not time-binding.
Yes, I think that you could say as long as you could perceive this danger, you will respond immediately. But you see, if you were to use this analogy of the animal, there might be an animal, you realize is dangerous, but then he might take another form that you don't see as dangerous.
I saw that too.
Right.
Yes.
And therefore there would be danger of slipping back. If you didn't, you might see that this time illusion might come in some other form.
Of course.
But I think that the major point is that you're saying that the brain is not belonging to any individual, right? And
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm clear on that.
and therefore, it's no use saying that the individual will slip back. You see,
No.
that already denies what you're saying. Right? But rather, you could say the danger might be that the brain might slip back. You see,
Which is the brain might get back because it itself has not seen the
it hasn't seen the other form of the illusion.
Illusions, yes. Holy Ghost taking different steps.
But you see, yes. Well, I think that's the point.
So that is the real root of it. Time.
Well, you see, time and separation as individuality are basically the same structure.
Of course.
Although it's not obvious in the beginning.
Yeah.
And
I wonder if you see that.
maybe that would be worth discussing. That why is time the same illusion as the same structure as individuality? That is psychological time. See, individuality is the sense of being a person who is, say, located here somewhere.
Located and divided.
Divided from the others. He extends out to some periphery. His domain extends out to some periphery. And also he has an identity which goes over time. He wouldn't regard himself as an individual unless he had an identity. If he said, today I'm one person, tomorrow I'm another, he would not be called an individual. So he has to be, it seems we mean by individual somebody who is in time. Right?
I think that is such a fallacy, this idea of individuality.
Yes, well, this is very... On the other hand, it would be very hard. Many people may find it very hard to be convinced that it's a fallacy.
Many people find everything very hard.
But say that there's a common feeling that as an individual I have existed at least from my birth, if not before, go on to death and perhaps later. You see that the whole idea of being an individual is to be in time, right?
Obvious.
And therefore, and to be in psychological time, right?
Of course, we have seen that.
I mean, not just clock time.
No.
So
if that illusion could be broken, that time has created individuality, which is erroneous.
Yes, through time, the notion of individuality has arisen.
Huh?
You say through time, through psychological time, the idea of individuality has arisen.
Now, can this brain understand that?
Well, I think then, as Narayan said, that say there's a great momentum in any brain
of all the
whole past, right?
Of course.
Keeps moving along. Right?
Can that momentum stop for a minute?
That's it,
Not a minute. Can that stop? Not for a minute.
Yeah.
The difficulty comes actually in this. It is intrinsic to you, the genetic coding, and you seem to function more or less unconsciously or driven by this kind of past momentum. And suddenly you see, as it were, like a flash, something true. The difficulty is it operates for some time, in the sense it may operate for a day, but then there is the fact that you are again caught in the old momentum. It is a human experience.
I know that, but I say it will not be caught.
That's where I said this can't be a feeble thing.
Don't use the word feeble or strong, but once you see the mind or the brain are aware of this fact, it cannot go back. How can it?
There must be, that's why I said there must be another way of preventing it from going back.
Not preventing, that means also time. You see, you are still thinking in prevention.
Prevention in the sense as a human factor.
The human being is irrational, right? And as long as he's functioning irrationally, any other rational factor, he says, I refuse to see it.
From what you are saying, you are suggesting that the very seeing prevents you also from going back.
There is no...
From sleeping. This is a human condition.
I wonder if we should ask this question about prevention. You see that it may be a question.
It has both the aspects. It has both the aspects. You see the fallacy of something, and the very seeing prevents you from slipping back.
Yes.
Because you see the danger of it.
You see,
nothing prevents you. I see in another sense you say that you have no temptation to slip back, right? Yeah. Therefore you don't have to be prevented, right? That is, if you really see it, there's no need to be prevented.
I don't see
it in this sense, yes. You're not tempted to go back.
Right,
I can't go back.
Temptation is a stronger word, in fact.
Right.
If I see the fallacy of all the religious nonsense, it's finished.
The only question which I raise is that you may not see it in another form. You see it.
It may come in different shapes and
then
forms.
you're tempted once again, right?
Yes.
I'm not. Mind is aware. It's not caught. But you're saying it does.
Other shapes and forms you can see through.
That's it.
No, there is another thing I want to ask. Is there a faculty in the human system which has this function, as it were, and so it has some effect or some transforming effect on the brain.
We said that.
No, we have not said that. We have not.
Wait, sir, we said that. Perception is out of time. Seeing immediately the whole nature of time, which is to have, to use a good old word, to have an insight into the nature of time. If you have that insight into the nature of time, not you, if there is an insight into the nature of time, the very brain cells which are part of time break down. The brain cells mutate, bring about a change in themselves. That's what this person is saying. You may disagree, you may say that prove it. I say this is not a matter of proof. It's a matter of act. Do it, find out, test it.
You were also saying the other day that when the consciousness is empty of its content,
That's
that
is, the content is time.
Yes. You said that leads to the transformation of the brain cells.
Yes.
When you say consciousness is empty of the content,
There's no consciousness as we know it.
yes. You see, and again you are using the word insight. What is the connection between the two?
Well, what is the
There's obvious connection
between what?
between
Insight?
a consciousness. When you have suggested that consciousness empty of its content.
Which is, careful.
Yes.
Consciousness is put together by its content.
Yes.
The content is the result of time.
Yes.
Now,
It's the content also is time. That the content,
of course,
it's about time as well, right?
and about time as of
And
course,
it is also actually put together by time.
time. Actually put together time, and also it's about time, as he pointed out. Now, if you have an insight into that, the whole pattern is gone, broken.
Yes. If you say
The insight, which is not of time, which is not of memory, which is not of knowledge, etc., etc.
who has this insight?
It's not
Because
me.
This is
There is an insight.
there's an insight, and
Careful.
the word insight has a positive connotation. You have an insight, and then the consciousness is empty of its content, has a negative kind of.
No, sir.
No. Now,
All right,
obviously,
proceed.
you are implying that the very emptying of the content, the emptiness of the content, is insight.
No. We are saying time is a factor which has put the content, which has made up the content. It's made up and it also thinks about. All that is a bundle of, is the result of time. Now, an insight into this whole movement. It's not my insight.
No, it's insight.
Insight. That brings about transformation in the brain. Because it is not time-binding, that insight.
If you say that this content, the psychological content, is a certain structure physically in the brain, you see, you may say that in order for this psychological content to exist, the brain, over many years, has made many connections of the cells which constitute this content. Right?
Quite.
And then there's a flash of insight which sees all this, right?
That's right.
And sees that it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And therefore, that all this begins to dissipate. And then when that has dissipated, there's no content. Then you say that whatever the brain is doing is something different.
Which is, which will go further.
Yeah.
Which is then there is total emptiness. Right? We won't go into, which we went into the other day.
Yes, well, emptiness of that content. Now, but when you say total emptiness, you don't mean you don't see the room.
No, of course.
But you mean emptiness of all this inward content.
That's right. There is that emptiness has tremendous energy. It is energy.
Yes, so could you say that the brain, having had all these connections tangled up, has locked up a lot of energy?
That's right.
And
wastage of energy.
Yeah, and then when they begin to dissipate,
that's right.
then that energy is there.
Yeah.
Or would you say that's as much physical energy as any other kind, of nervous energy?
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, you've heard all this, Narayan. We can go on more in detail, but you've heard, en principe, the principle, the root of it. Is it an idea or a fact?
An idea of it has no.
No, I'm asking you. No, don't dodge it. Is it an idea or a fact? I hear all this. I have heard it with the hearing of the ear, so I make it into an idea. But if I hear it, not only with the hearing of the ear, but hear it in my being, in the very structure of myself, I hear this statement. What happens then? If that doesn't take place, it becomes merely an idea we can spin along for the rest of one's life, playing with ideas. But if that sense of, yes, so, sir, we are more or less, you and I, and perhaps, more or less captured audience. If there was a scientist, biofeedback or another brain specialist, would they accept all this? Would they even listen to all?
Well, most, maybe a few would, but obviously the majority would not. I mean,
no. So what? You see, how do we affect, I'm using the word affect, how do we touch the human brain?
Yes, well, you see, let me say the way it will sound to most scientists is it will sound rather abstract, you see, that they say, well, it could be so, it's a nice theory.
Oh, good boy, it's nice.
No, well, it's a nice theory, you see, that we have no proof of it, you see.
Of course.
And therefore they'd say, okay, I mean, it doesn't really excite me very much because I don't see any proof. And see, I think that's the way they
would operate.
The more favorable ones would look at it that way. You know?
Yeah.
let's say if you have some more evidence, then we will be very
We'll
interested.
come back later.
Well, we'll become very interested, right? And you see, you can't give any proof. Because whatever is happening, nobody can see it, right, with their eyes.
Of course. I understand. But I'm asking, what shall we do? How do you affect, or how do you... Our mind, our brain is not my brain, right? It's the human brain, which has evolved through million years. One freak or one biological freak can move out of it. But perhaps, or does. How do you get at the human mind to make him see this?
Well, I think that what doesn't, you have to communicate the necessity of what you're saying, that it is inevitable, right? You have to communicate the necessity of what you are saying, that it's inevitable. You see that if somebody sees something, you explain it to him and he sees it happening before his eyes, he says, yes, that's so, right?
But that requires somebody to listen.
Yes.
Somebody who says, really, I want to capture this, I want to understand this, I want to find out. But we're all, you follow what I'm saying? Apparently that's one of the most difficult things in life.
Well, that's the function of this occupied brain, that it's occupied with itself and doesn't listen.
In fact, one of the things is this occupation seems to be, it starts very early, and when you're young it's very powerful, and it continues through all your life.
Yes.
How do you, through education, make this,
that's a different matter. I would say I would work at it differently. If you're asking how to set about it, I'll tell you.
No,
it's very moment you see the importance of not being occupied. You yourself see that as a tremendous truth. You will find ways and to help them. That is creative. You can't just be told and copy and imitate, then you're lost.
Well, and the question is, how is it possible to communicate to the brain which rejects, which doesn't listen?
I said that's what I'm asking.
Yes, well, is there a way?
No. If I refuse to listen, well, you go to the Pope and tell him all this, he'll say, what? So I think we better stop, don't you? See, sir, I think meditation is a great factor in this. I feel we have been meditating. See, ordinary people wouldn't accept this as meditation.
Yeah, well, that's the, they've used the word so often
I
in a
know this
routine way
lost.
again.
It's really lost. So that's one of the things. Something real made vulgar, common, is gone. Yoga, as I was pointing out, was something extraordinary, only for the, if I may use the word without being misunderstood, very few. Now it has become common, a way of earning a livelihood. It's gone. So, meditation is this, the emptying of consciousness. You follow?
Yes, but let's get it clear, because before you said it would happen through insight, you see.
Yes.
Now, are you saying meditation is conducive to insight?
Yeah, meditation is insight.
It is insight already. But it's some sort of work you do, but in addition, see, insight is usually thought of as the flash, right?
Yes, insight is a flash.
But also meditation is a more constant...
meditation. Now we must be careful in the usage of what we mean by meditation.
That's the question, yes.
Yeah. We can reject the systems, the methods, the authorities, the acknowledged Zen, Tibetan, Hindu, Buddhist. We can reject all that because that's not obviously it's mere tradition, repetition, and time-binding nonsense. For me, it's not.
Don't you see that some of them could have been original? Some of them could have had an original insight.
If they had, there wouldn't be any. It wouldn't belong to Christian, Hindu, Buddhist.
Yes.
There wouldn't be anything
in the past.
Oh, Kilosa. I mean, who knows?
Yes.
I'm also clever at this. Now, I mean, if meditations are is this penetration. You follow it? I don't know if I'm using the right word. It is this sense of moving without any past. I can't.
But it's the only point to clear up is when you use the word meditation, do you mean something more than insight, do you see? It seems to mean something a bit more.
A bit more.
Right.
Much more.
Yes.
Because insight has freed the brain from the past, from time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an enormous statement.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation, as we know it, is becoming. And any sense of becoming is still time. Therefore, there is no sense of becoming.
But that seems to mean that you have to have insight in order to, if you're going to meditate, right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
You cannot meditate without
of course,
insight.
I mean, that's, of course.
Right. I mean, you can't regard it as a procedure by which you will come to insight.
That immediately implies time.
Yes.
A procedure, a system, a method to have insight sounds so nonsensical. Insight into greed, into fear, into all that, frees the mind from all that. Right? Then, meditation has quite a different quality. It's nothing to do with all the gurus' meditations. Right? So, that is what? Would we say, sir, it's wrong words, all these. To have insight, there must be silence.
Yes. Well, it's the same. We seem to be going in a circle.
No, for the moment.
For the moment, yes. Yeah. My mind is silent. Right?
Silence. So, the silence of insight has cleansed.
Well, it's dispelled
all
the
that
structure, of the
yes,
occupation.
Yes. Then meditation. Oh Lord, what is it? There is no movement as I know it, as we know it. Movement means time, all that. It is not that kind of movement.
Well, some other kind of.
I don't see how we can measure that by words. See that sense of limitless state.
Yes, but in Ojai you were saying that nevertheless it's necessary to find some language.
Huh?
In Ojai you were saying that it is still necessary to find a language, even
yes,
though
sir.
it's unsayable.
Yeah, we will find the language.